What's up, everybody? So, Niger and Will here, and we're going to be talking about the new movie documentary, shall I say, You Cannot Kill David Arquette, which will be releasing this Friday, August 28th. It will be available digitally, maybe some theaters. I'm not really sure about the status of that since theaters are starting to open. But yes, you can get it on video demand and digitally all over this Friday, August 28th. Some people may have already screened this earlier this year. You probably could have screened this earlier this year at South by Southwest, but obviously the pandemic had other plans. So therefore, this highly anticipated documentary is just now releasing. So we had a chance to watch it, and we're just going to give our thoughts about it because I'm just going to go off the break and say, like, this documentary shocked me in a lot of ways. I went into this documentary knowing who David Arquette is, knowing a lot about one of the most controversial moments in professional wrestling, but I never really looked at it from his shoes. So unlike most wrestling documentaries right now, where it's really about pulling back the curtains and getting the deep secrets and, you know, something being really dark and gritty, this documentary wasn't that. This was actually about the redemption story of David Arquette and his will to want to be a professional wrestler. He was just like many of us who, you know, had dreams or wanted dreams to be a wrestler, got an opportunity of the lifetime. I mean, who would have said no to being a WCW heavyweight champion? Nobody. And it was a decision like other decisions that he made in his life that kind of backfired on him. So this is a very more positive, more inspiring story of David Arquette, who we've seen from the beginning, who just beat himself down to depression and alcoholism to getting in the best shape of his life, still doing some crazy stuff, but nonetheless gaining the respect in the wrestling community. So I think it's about an hour and a half long. So it's a really easy watch. You definitely will enjoy it. You definitely will get a lot of insight about him himself. You do get a lot of good cameos from people, Ric Flair, his wife, Booker T's in it. I have to mention this, but Nick Gage is obviously in this.
Lots of familiar indie faces throughout this.
Yeah. So, but overall, it's a really good documentary. We're just here to kind of talk about a lot of the things that stood out to you. So, yes, well, I've already had a full review on it, but now that we're having a discussion, tell me your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head there with what this is really about, what the whole real thought process, I guess, was behind the movie, behind the idea of You Cannot Kill David Arquette, is that everyone knows the story about him winning the WCW title and how that just was such an odd thing that really just in so many people's mind, it kind of sunk the ship for WCW. That was like the nail in the coffin for a lot of people as just too ridiculous of a publicity stunt. Mm-hmm. And so when you hear David Arquette and you think pro wrestling, that's everyone's touch point immediately is like, oh, WCW, they made the movie with him Ready to Rumble and then he won the world title. And just everyone thinks that. And they really address that in the movie that like, to a lot of wrestling fans, that was just like the most sacrilege thing you could possibly do. The idea of bringing in this Hollywood actor and then making him the world champion. But to your point, as you said, is brought up in the movie, David Arquette wasn't looking to do that. It's not like he pushed for that. He was thrust into that role. He was asked to do that by Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff and everyone who was running WCW at the time. So when this whole movie really puts you in the position of being in David Arquette's shoes when all this is happening, where it's like, he knew it wasn't a good idea. He didn't want to do it, but you're there trying to play ball and be a team player and you're into pro wrestling. And it's like, hey, what are you going to do? They want to make you world champion. So, you know, Diamond Dallas Page addresses it in there. It's like, you're going to be that guy who's like, oh, no. Let's not do that. You know, it is what it is. It was a crazy time. They were desperate for publicity. And, you know, I think this movie does a lot to really understand all that a lot better. And then to see how going forward from that, we gotta remember that was in 2000. This movie's now 20 years later. David Arquette's had a crazy life over the last 20 years, from like his Hollywood trajectory really changing from, as they talk about, getting typecast from the Scream movies and that whole franchise, which coincidentally now is coming back around. So everything comes full circle. We got the wrestling coming full circle for Amir. We got Scream coming full circle. But the last 20 years has been a wild ride for him of like falling off that Hollywood radar and kind of like a redemption story, which is really what this movie is about in my mind.
Absolutely. And he's not shy to say about how inexperienced he was. You know, he didn't understand how the business worked. He had his trajectory in Hollywood was definitely shooting up. So, you know, when it comes down to marketing, press and stuff like that, it seemed like it made sense, but he didn't realize he was stepping in a whole new genre of entertainment, and not just for the publicity for the movies, but when it actually came to him doing the wrestling work, he hadn't done anything. He didn't learn. He had never had any formal training. So you did see a kid getting the opportunity of the lifetime, maturing into the man he is today by getting actual training. Some actually local to us in Richmond, Virginia, and, you know, going all the way down to TJ in to Tijuana in Mexico, and, you know, learning the luchador style. So, like, you know, and even earning a mask, which, if you know anything about wrestling, that's sacred. So him getting that proved and shows that he earned the respect within his trainer. So, like, he legit did the ropes. He did backyard wrestling. He went all the way up to GCW in LA and took a Nick Gage beating. So, you know, the respect is there. So for, you know, the wrestling fan viewers, you know, much like myself, I went in disliking a person. I didn't really try to understand why. I thought it was just a religious thing to do. Like David Arquette, he messed up the business, even though I didn't understand what the business was. And he was a grown man. So, you know, now that, you know, I'm at this point of my life of understanding how the business works, I appreciate him so much more, because he didn't take off of his celebrity or stardom and say, well, I did that and I'm good now because of this. No, he went back and actually did the work. And I forget how old he is, but he even at this age of his life, he's 48. Even at this, so he was 47 when this happened. So even at this point in his life, he went and did the work. He went out there and did the work, and you know, he trained with DDP. He you know, again, he went all over learning different styles. You just have to respect that. That's just something that, you know, all about being a wrestler. And even other people would say, like, you know, they gained so much more respect for him because he did it the right way.
Yeah, this was really about him looking back on that WCW run and everything that happened as a guy who was a wrestling fan, you know, going into all that and like had an interest in it, and just being like the years of abuse of just getting that whole like reputation of he ruined wrestling, he ruined it all, and just like him thinking like, I want to fix that. I want to make it right. I want to go back and do it the right way, do it the way it should have been done. Instead of me getting rocketed to the top of this card, let me get trained. Let me lose 50 pounds. Let me do jujitsu. Let me go and do the backyard dirty shows that like all like the struggling people who are first starting out trying to learn and get into wrestling. Let me get that experience instead of immediately getting on national TV because of the way I could get in through, you know, the movie hookup. And there's no reason he had to do this. He certainly didn't do it for money. So it's like he's doing it strictly out of the love of wanting to get that experience, wanting to get that under his belt. And I think in his head, it was really a case of like, I want to fix my image into wrestling fans. I want to have a different last memory of me and not have it be WCW World Champion David Arquette, have it be David Arquette's going out and doing death matches. David Arquette's losing 50 pounds and putting on all this muscle. David Arquette's showing up at the local neighborhood indie, just like all the other guys, and putting in his time, putting in his effort, and doing it the way that any wrestler starting out would do it. It's a wild ride. It's really interesting to see, especially, you know, from our perspective of knowing like legit indie wrestlers and the struggles they go through. It's like, yeah, he was in that darn barn down in Richmond, right with them sweating, no AC, and getting the most, you know, salt of the earth experience that you could possibly get. So they were pulling no punches between that and wrestling in the streets of Tijuana at the stop signs, trying to get, you know, some pocket change that they do down there at the stoplight. Like, I've seen that in plenty of darn, documentaries on Lucha Libre, and he did all that. It's a real fun journey, and it really gives you a lot of perspective on David Arquette and just his thinking, what he's been doing the past 20 years. And he's a complicated guy as it goes into the movie. His brain is wired differently, is how they put it. And this really demonstrates it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I mean, even still, like, I think you bring up a good point. Like, he easily could have took the fast track off his celebrity now. Anything he does is TMZ worthy, so he clearly could have banked off of that, but he did it the right way. And even against his own family's pleasure, he still did it. But his wife was super supportive of him. And he even had some own personal issues that was going on. I mean, even with Luke Perry's death, who was his best friend, he slumped back into depression and back to alcoholism, and he pulled himself out of it again. So like he's fought many demons here. The typecasting. I mean, when you look they show this in there, but when you look at that Vanity cover that he was on many years ago, when you look at that audience of people, that crowd of people that he was on that magazine cover with, Leonardo DiCaprio, Will Smith. We're talking about some of the actors who have at one point or another been the highest paid actors in all of Hollywood, or is very decorated in their career, and he's known for Dewey.
At the time, it was the hottest young stars rising in Hollywood in the 90s, and he was in that conversation, and a lot of them that rocket ship kept going straight up, and his went up, and it veered off to the side. Is totally what happened. It's a very different journey between the Hollywood journey and then doing the wrestling thing, and just how it all intertwined together. It really sidetracked his career in a way that, I don't think anyone was expecting at the time, because Hollywood is, of course, their perspective was like, why are you doing this wrestling stuff? Yeah. And that on top of the typecasting at the time, that was just shaking that look and shaking that idea of that's what people were knowing you for at the time. It didn't work. It didn't work out, and it's unfortunate. So he's trying to right that wrong, I guess, of like making a different lasting memory for who he is.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's undoubtedly a good documentary that you want to watch. You would absolutely become a fan of this guy if you haven't. Your perception of him will absolutely change if you were like me, who did not like him for reasons of being a wrestling fan, and he ruined your company and all that other hoopla. This will absolutely change your perspective on that. He just came off of another movie, Spree, which I thought was really well done as well too. So like, David Arquette is definitely trending in the right direction, and maybe it took him a little bit longer than other people's, but he's doing his due diligence to get back into the megastar that he is. We'll see if he has any involvement with Scream. I haven't heard anything about that, but hey, even if he did now, a lot of good franchises are being resurrected and so or rebooted. So I can just see that being another thing for him that will just ultimately be positive for him, because even the wrestling aspect for him is working on a positive note. So it's a good roller coaster ride. Again, it's not a documentary that's out here digging up dirt or anything like that. It's just truly a redemption story of a guy that just had a bad start to everything he was passionate about.
Yeah, and I'd like to jump in real quick and say, if you're coming from this perspective of not knowing David Arquette as a wrestler or not knowing wrestling, you do not need to know that to enjoy this. Just getting his story from the acting side and going off into this world of wrestling, you by no means do you need to know about all the stuff he did in wrestling and all, what we're focusing on, obviously, with the wrestling podcast tie-in and all that. It's a story that anyone, I think, can appreciate, because it's a man on his journey through life and his family and just, his ups and downs of like the past 20 years of like being at the height of his career and then just like things going sideways and then trying to write it back, years later. It's a story I think anyone can relate to.
Yeah. But yes, You Cannot Kill David Arquette will be available August 28th, digital platforms, video on demand, whatever your movie purchasing service is. And maybe it's in your theaters, depending on your location, but you absolutely want to check it out. As always, come back in the comments and let me know what you think. Stay tuned. Other reviews, other interviews, and other good stuff is on your way. So thank you for watching the review. See you soon.